How do we set substantial goals in this very difficult world of today, challenging world of today? And I thought, let's take this from the start. Why do we set goals? We set goals because we want to chart our roadmap to a future destination, to a desirable future destination. And we all know that substantial is the total opposite from flimsy goals. Flimsy goals are the ones we usually have on the 1st of January. They tend to repeat themselves every year, and every year we kind of drop them also very quickly because those 5 kilos won't go away, and that healthy eating is also so dicey, and so on. Substantial goals are quite different from that. So, goal setting is about connecting to the future. Hi, Reddy, you are back. Good to see you again. I just started about goal setting. It's about connecting to the future. And I would like to highlight in general, are two main psychological tendencies with how we relate to the future. And the first one we all know is our sense of adventure. We would not be the entrepreneurs, the freelancers that we are if we would not have a sense of adventure. And I think we all know from our good, strong times how we feel when we are adventurous. We explore, we take risks. If we fall in the dust, we dust off, we start again, we try something new. We are adventurous. And I am sure each of you can remember many times. I see this picture of Ilana in what I think is a canoe. I'm not so good with boats, but it looks like a canoe, looks like an image of an adventurous woman out on a trip. We all have a very strong memory and a feeling of how we feel when we are adventurous. Now, the opposite psychological trend of that is, of course, our fear for the unknown. And in times of crisis, in times of disaster, in times of great uncertainty, we fear the unknown. All of us have those two tendencies in us. They are part of humanity. This is a slide of an old world map. And I would like to illustrate how humanity in the past has gone through all that polarity of sense of adventure and fear for the unknown. Now, this image takes us to very early maps when people still believed the Earth was a flat disk, floating in dangerous waters, waters filled with sea monsters and dangerous things, and it would be very scary and very dangerous to go there. There was this saying in Latin, terra incognita, unknown territory, is terra pericolosa, it's dangerous. You want to avoid going there. And as we know, if we go centuries back, many people didn't go beyond their village. But we also know that our scientific correction of seeing the world not as a flat disk, but as a sphere, has come about by the adventurers who actually braved all the dangers, the seafarers, the explorers, those who charted new territories. So these two tendencies are both important. Sometimes we have to fear the unknown and protect ourselves, but sometimes we have to branch out and explore if there isn't more to this. All the scared people who thought they would tip off the edge of the earth were the ones that would not have set out on a long journey. So if we think about this development in science from a flat earth to the spheric earth, humanity has gone with that belief system through what we call a paradigm shift. I love that word paradigm shift. I always use it in research training because inevitably some student has found it in their theory books and they can't make sense of what a paradigm means. So I say it's a model, it's a belief system. And the more I think about today, so forget now this the old times, we're now today, the more I think about today and I listen to people feeling so lost with our normal in our new normal, and what is that new normal, and is the new normal, is it actually normal, that whole confusion. We are going through a paradigm shift with what we try and believe and hold fast about our world. I think there is no denying that as a humanity we face a world crisis, and a world crisis brings about fear. There is a lot of fear. There is legitimate fear all around us, especially for loss, for death. I hope it has not happened in your families, but the fear is legitimate. And we also know that fear is very contagious. I sometimes think the fear around us is even more contagious than the actual pandemic. What is it that we actually experience when times are so out of our control? We actually fear that we want to be able to control the outcome of what we are trying to do, that we cannot control our situation. Now, with this tendency being going so viral amongst us, it is very important that we don't allow fear to win over our sense of adventure. Because once fear wins, it's over with our resilience. That is a very bad situation. And because the situation is so dire on all of us, on the world economy, I was looking, when I was thinking about this presentation, can I now not find a good case of a business that deals with this whole crisis in a positive manner? So I would like now to present this case that I have detected. Okay. It is a slide from a website. So it's not the clearest picture of all. But now, me coming from Belgium, I followed a case of a business in Belgium. And I don't know if you know the country at all, but actually we're famous for at least one very positive thing, and it's our chocolates. Belgium has many empires of chocolates. We're now talking big business. We are very familiar with the Lindt brand in South Africa, but Belgium has quite a few of these enormous brands. You will find them in the top sections of the airport, tax-free shops, and so on. And if you want to surprise somebody with a horrendously expensive gift, you go to this company, Neuhaus. Neuhaus has the most exquisite chocolates. I can actually talk a whole hour about these chocolates, which is besides the point, but it's just to drive home to you how important this business is in Belgium. And also, I wanted to illustrate a case that I bumped into, because lo and behold, early in January, the CEO of the Neuhaus company, that is a certain Injas van Doorselare. That's a very Flemish name. Van Doorselare. Beats Van Steenkiste. It sounds pretty much more upbeat. He was interviewed about his business and how it fared during the COVID. Now, you must know the tradition in Belgium about gift giving. Gift giving and social life revolve around presenting friends, family, business partners with elaborate boxes of chocolate. This is the gift par excellence with which you cannot go wrong. Obviously, the big customers are also the tourists. All these beautiful boutiques with the irresistible packaging and so on. Every important marketplace will have a shop. You can imagine with the Easter lockdown, a special festival, special chocolates for all the festivals. You can imagine the Easter eggs, etc., etc. When the lockdown came around Easter, the sales from that Neuhaus empire dropped with 35%. Now that was big, and that was from the very beginning. So what did the CEO say? What was his take on this situation? He said that he himself with his team, they decided when they saw that we need two kinds of specs. We need our survival specs on the one hand, because it's a fact that our company is losing big time. if we lose 35% of our sales, that is a very big loss. So we must cut our costs. But we need another kind of specs. We need also infinity specs. So with our infinity specs, we projected our company into the year 2022. And we decided to see 2020 and 21 as transitional years. During the transitional years, we are developing new chocolates, new packaging, new sales channels, new technical systems. And we are also attracting the right kind of people who will reinforce us in 2021. Some of the staff who may be brilliant in the little boutiques, wrapping beautiful bow ties around packages and having all the client skills in the shop, they may not be the kind of people who would be good for the company when the sales practices change. So preparatory transitional years. But he highlighted in his interview the infinity specs are the most important. Because if we only focus on the pain in the moment, we get paralyzed with our complaints and with our fear. So he said, we must actually not be afraid of alternatives. And somehow he was rewarded with his optimistic outlook, because when our second lockdown came, that was then obviously now recently, during the December, another great period of gift giving, he said, although people were not allowed to visit, they still wanted to honor the tradition of saying, I think of you. And they had the boxes delivered, and the sales actually went up. We want to show that we think of you, and it's then an ideal product. So in summary, he said, an enterprise, we call that entrepreneurship more. An enterprise is about letting go what does not work and about finding solutions, focusing on solutions. Now that resonates with me because, like most freelancers, I get set in ways that I know work very well. Suddenly, they don't work so well anymore. If anything makes me feel alienated from you is that we're not in the same room. I cannot see most faces. I don't know where you're fast asleep by now or whatever you are doing. You're totally invisible to me, and you can also not see me in my normal element. So, yeah, the old ways. Yeah, it's good, Kamini. It's glad to see your face. I see an extra face. And Lauren, also fantastic to see you. I see a picture of a certain Peter with his camera. There is Tumi Sang also showing up. That's wonderful. It's a bit of contact, but this new normal is a challenge for my kind of company with all the interactive projects. So the CEO of the chocolate company was also asked about his personal goals. I'm always interested in the person behind his empires. And he said something that particularly resonated with me. He said he is going to stop watching and listening to all the scientists and the virologists, because by now every Belgian is a virologist or an expert. You know how it is. Everybody is now a virologist and has something to say, and nobody agrees with anybody. But he said, they mean well. They mean well, but they paralyze me with their pointing finger and with these statistics. They just fill me with fear. So for me to be able to continue functioning, I am just going to limit my intake. He actually suggested that Belgium should create a special midnight channel for all the COVID news, and then the people who really want to watch it must stay up and focus on it then, but not let the news dominate all the time with tragic information. And then a second thing that he saw as a personal goal, he said, what I am going to do is I am going to keep moving forward safely. And he used the image of how learner drivers are supposed to drive. Now, I think learner drivers in Belgium are a bit different from what I see on my streets here in Port Elizabeth once in a while. But in theory, a learner driver keeps a social, safe distance from the other cars and drives with discipline, but actually driving forward into the direction of the future. I don't know if that kind of advice resonates with you, but I was glad to find something like that early on in January. And then I was thinking, okay, this is now a motivating example for me, but it comes from somebody who has this huge company. I am only, I am my business. I am a small business with a part time assistant and with projects for which I liaise with other people. But basically, I am not having the resources that Mr. Van Doorselaar has. I don't have this whole team of experts at my beck and call and all the capital of that enterprise. As freelancers, we are flying solo compared to these big businesses. But yet I thought I take something really important from what he shared there in that interview. And my lesson from this is that substantial goals are the goals for the long haul, the goals that we see through our infinity specs. And the short-term goals that I am setting for now, they are more like stepping stones. And I think all of us who have tried to cross a streaming river or a treacherous part of the mud with just these stepping stones, we know these stepping stones are very important or we wouldn't get across, but we don't want to reach a stepping stone. We want to reach something that is really attractive. And then we must also not forget, as freelancers, bigger companies have strengths, but small organizations, in contrast to the large ones, we have also particular strengths. Well, first of all, we don't carry that responsibility for hundreds of people that we employ, which I think if you carry that responsibility now, you may have some really sleepless nights if you have a heart and a conscience. And we don't have to rescue like a whole empire. And in terms of change management, we are far more agile and flexible. Indeed, we are actually more free than a big corporate enterprise. We are more free. It's the essence of what we have chosen, to be free and flexible. And as I was thinking about this, I remembered a book that where my early career was at the sociology department at the Leuven University in Belgium. And of course, as sociologists, we had to read all the trendy books of the time or pretend we had read them. But one of them that I read was Schumacher's book on Small is Beautiful. Schumacher was an economist, an alternative economist, very powerful influence in those days in 1973. He started this whole movement of smaller scale economies and economics as if people mattered. That was his philosophy. It was obviously as a protest manifest against the impact of the big corporates already then. So small is beautiful. And I think we should remember that we have a very powerful, unique aspect to us. When I think about a freelance enterprise, running a kite for me is something really spectacular because you may be such a small person. I remember when I was a child, my kite used to lift me off the ground, and now I don't play these powerful kites because they will just take me from PE to East London and I will be lost in the ocean. But when you run a kite, you have to have that flexibility to go with the changing wind. But if you can capture the right wind, you are getting an incredible lift. This is completely different from how a large organization tries to make a U-turn or a change. Like the big container ships, if they need to make a turn, a U-turn, they need a very big berth. But if we see ourselves with that powerful business that we have a lot of leverage with change, with the changing winds that we would not have if we were bogged down with a lot of bureaucracy. So, and there's also a sense of freedom about this, a sense of freedom. I like that. Why are we freelancers? Because we must have had a reason for choosing that quality of freedom in our enterprise. And I must say very honestly to you that if I have my low moments in my own enterprise, it's usually because of the financial situation, not because I don't love my work. I love my work, but finance is sometimes another matter, especially in the East Cape. Ask Lisa and myself, if we have to set fees, we just have to grind our teeth and accept what we are being given sometimes. It is really tricky sometimes. But when I really flag, I think about some of the bosses that I worked for. And they were, well, in my case, they were academic bosses. But really, if I think of some of these bullies, then I know why I wanted to be my own boss. I'm also a taskmaster to myself, but I can never say I am forced to do something that I'm not believing in because of the boss who is trying to get at me. But if you are warmed up, then I would like to carry on and share some guidelines. Thank you. You are a lovely audience. So great. I appreciate that bit of resonance, so I don't feel I'm talking to my walls here. Great. So my first guideline is a bit a lengthy one. It links very close to the work that I do. Um, so bear with me because I share it because I think it's important. Guidelines to set your substantial goals in your freelance enterprise. The number one guideline is know your brand identity. Know your brand ID, because that self-knowledge is power. I have now for 30 years about been doing a lot of facilitation work, conflict intervention work, organization development projects. It's that line of work that I come out of, and which gradually became named as coaching. When I started my first consultancy, coaching was not such a big name. It was something just used for sports. But now coaching is a completely different umbrella. It's a recognized professional field. And within my sort of coaching of over the 30 years, something came forward, which is this aspect of working with a biographical techniques and outlook and philosophy at coaching and doing it in that particular way. And if I think about people asking me when I started out the early years, uh, the marketing people who always wanted to give me this big advice, you have capital, drive a BMW, you driving this little whatever skedonky, this is not good enough for your image. I had all that advice that I couldn't do anything with. But they always had me when they said, what is your product? What is your brand? Because I was too baffled to answer that question. I was still exploring what would actually come out of my early services. I was service orientated and I could not name anything that would be the brand. But now, so many years later, I think I can show a visual symbol of what would be my brand identity. So I'm just using it as an example. There you see a book cover, and that book doesn't say in the title, this is about biographical coaching. It says it's about a lifetime of personal power. And it's about, as you can see, challenges and opportunities at every age. Out of my work, especially the last 20 years in Port Elizabeth, I have, of course, immigrated with my toolkit that I picked up overseas, which focused on the biographical. But I could see that that word didn't mean anything to most people. And actually, my average client here would ask me, but a biography, what is that? They're not familiar with that concept. So I thought, okay, that's just important to know, because when clients said to me, can I read something about what you explained to me? Because it's always very interesting when you explain it to me when I sit here with you in your room, but when I come home and I try and remember it, then I can't remember it. This was a stimulation after so many years of doing project work to sit behind my desk and say, okay, Janine, this coaching that you do, this biographical coaching, it has really grown into your most prominent and most empowering aspect of your work. This has become actually the ID of your business. And even if it doesn't appear in the title, but it is explained in the book for the people who want to read more about that, where this idea of biography come from and why is it important in my life, it is there. This book, self-published, needless to say, freelancers have to do this unless you're a celebrity and you got like big business behind you to make the bucks out of your book. Freelancers do it themselves. We're known for that. It's self-help society. But I feel that this is really my brand ID. My lifetime cover book, it is actually because all my work is about empowering development, whether that be development of an individual, of a team, of an organization, of a group. So our brand ID does not have to be symbolized, but often it is symbolized in the product that we make. If you have a product, that's always great. If it is a service is something so invisible to wrap. I sometimes wonder, why didn't I just print t-shirts? It would have been easier to say, this is my product, this is the t-shirt. But a service is more difficult to explain if you're in a coaching field. But at last, I have something that represents my brand, and it's born out of the real action. Now, where am I going with this? I know I'm now here with a more sophisticated audience, so I don't have to explain to you, people do have a life story. We have our biographies. But what I would like to highlight to you is something that most of us are not so aware of, and it is that every organization, every business, that means also your own freelance enterprise, every organization is a living organism that has a life of its own, that has a biography of its own, with its own characteristics, with challenges, opportunities, and patterns of working. And basically, in all my organization development projects, once we were workshopping, this biography of the business became clear. It came to the surface. Very interesting, because you usually don't look like an organization, like a living organism. You look at the stats and the sales and the financial picture and the human resources picture, but not exactly about the essence of what's going on there. Now, a very interesting observation, at least I found this very interesting, I found it actually quite a revelation, is that in small enterprises, small businesses that are started and managed and led by a particular entrepreneur, the biography of that business mirrors or resonates with the biography of the entrepreneur. That is quite a very interesting analytical point, but it's also very important towards how you manage and empower and develop your business further. So I cannot not, for reasons of confidentiality, say in this business it was that, in that business it was that. That's actually been always a tender point in my own business, that I could not come forward with blowing the trumpet of I worked for so and so and so and so, because most of the time they called me in at a time that it was not going well and no business wanted to advertise. They needed outside help with that. But I can give an example of my own story. When I was last in my initial career in academic, I was first in Leuven, but then in South Africa. I ended up at UNISA. And in UNISA, those days in the sociology department, I was a pen pusher. I did not have classrooms. I was not a teacher anymore. And I'm an interactive teacher. I couldn't be a pen pusher. And I was not happy in my job anymore. Although before I was a happy academic, it was changing, and I got very frustrated with that. And I was already in my free time doing out development projects and intervention projects. But all my friends said, Janine, don't lose your secure job, because if you go freelance as a consultant, you don't know where your money is coming from. Don't do it. Hold your job. It gives you prestige and blah, blah, blah. And you have your paycheck every month. So I hovered for about 2 years, being very unhappy. Then, in my private life, something totally unexpected happened. I was in Pretoria, my father was in Antwerpen. He died unexpectedly, totally unexpectedly. And at that point in time, I had the intuition that my moment had come to leave behind something that was not working for me anymore, that I needed to be closer to my family, go back to Belgium and make a plan. So it's a clear illustration of how an incident in personal life shapes actually the start of my business. And at many occasions later, significant changes came about alongside with changes in my personal life. When you ever sit down and think about that in your own situation, you will be amazed how much parallels there are. Now, without boring you about my research techniques, it's actually looking into the biography of an organization starts in a very simple way. And I've done it countless times with particular businesses. I remember one time I can actually call the company, it's a motor company based in Port Elizabeth. And the owner of the company, a grandfatherly figure, asked me to host a conference with him, and he would have all his staff on board, from the mechanics to the finance department. It was a whole mixed bag. And he said to me, "What can I contribute to that conference?" I said to him, "Listen, you must please tell the story of how you started your business, why you started your business, and what happened next. And if you have photographs of various times in the existence of your company that illustrate something, put them all on the wall. People want to know the story of your company." So, the story of the company, if one analyzes that narrative, the story is always very emotional. It's very detailed. It's very difficult from a financial report presentation, but it always reveals the driving force behind that business, the motivation, if you want to call it that. It always reveals patterns of functioning, also dysfunctional ones. And yes, that they often reflect the personality of the business pioneer. If it's an impatient personality, you're going to see some reckless decision making. If it is a person who can't deal with admin, you're going to find that weakness. If it's a person who is too trusting, you're going to see a lot of fraudulent activity in that company. There is always a very interesting relationship. But what you always find is crucial information about the identity of the brand of that business. And why do I attach importance to that? Because the identity of your business, that biographical knowledge, is the foundation to which you can apply your infinity specs. Reveal the vision for the future. See these sustainable goals in the future, the long-term goals. So I would correct my definition of substantial goals. They are not just long-term goals. They are the kind of goals, long-term goals, that are in line with the unique biography of your business. These are the goals that will see you through. I would like to repeat that. In line with the uniqueness of your business, because no two businesses are the same. There is a uniqueness to that. And every guru who's going to tell you, "I've got the 3 foolproof steps, and if you do this, you're going to have the success," overlooks the complexity and the uniqueness of a particular situation. And there is no standard advice of this sustainable goal is the goal, the one size that fits all. It is just not like that. So, for instance, to give some illustrations of what could be substantial long-term goals in a business, say by 2022, 2025, it may be for a particular business specific expertise, upgrading procedures of delivery, higher professional standards, setting up in a different context, in a different environment, setting up with a different team, reaching a particular financial goal, finding an international outlet, mastering a new language. I cannot tell you how many of my NMU graduates here are learning Mandarin to be able to build their careers in China, or Cantonese or Mandarin, one of the two. Very difficult, but that's what they need to master. They need a few stepping stones to get there. It may be your company needs succession planning, or it may be that your focus will be to achieve innovative services, and you're now going to go through the stepping stones of research and development. But whatever your goal of substance will be, it will be the logical goal for the next level of development in your business. And with that, if you do something anti-development, it's not right. But if you go with understanding the flow of development in your business, then actually you can't go wrong. It gives you resilience. So that was my first guideline. Excuse me, I got a bit carried away with that, but it is so important. Knowledge is power. Understand your business from another perspective than just looking at the bank balances. They can be depressing. So my second guideline is in line with the previous one, do build upon collective intelligence. And I want to remind us all of the power of brainstorm. I don't know of your experience, but I've taken many teams through brainstorming sessions where you facilitate everybody's subjective take, and out of all that subjective input, what comes across as objectivity for a desired future. Brainstorming is a very interesting process. And out of this comes something that nobody individually could anticipate. And people will say, I never, ever imagined this. Yes. When we are under duress, we tend to focus on problem solving. And many management teams I've seen, when they call me in, it's always because there is duress, there is a problem. They are focused on the problem solving like a rabbit in the headlights. Solutions for present problems, but without having that future perspective. No infinity specs. That future perspective is essential. It is the oxygen of sustainability. We now all know about the importance of oxygen these days. Future perspective is the oxygen of sustainability. And often we need that collective intelligence that is born out of a brainstorm to find that future perspective. In a brainstorm, anything goes, and crazy things are being said sometimes. But in the end, it's a kind of chemical process. It's a kind of laboratory situation. It stirs the imagination. And whereas as a person thinking for yourself, your thoughts go in circles, you can find out of a brainstorm something that you, because you're limited in your own perspective, could not figure out. It is part of what we don't like to confess, but everybody has a blind spot. And we need the input of different perspectives, especially if we are trying to innovate. Now, with this comes a big warning sign, though, a big warning sign, especially for our solo businesses that can be very different. Yes, we need that collective intelligence, but we need to tap into brainstorming with trustworthy persons. Not the kind of persons that are out to copycat your way of working or your recipe, or who are going to steal your client base. Because if you brainstorm, you let people in. So it has to be trusted people. I cannot tell you, I hope you haven't had this experience, but in my coaching in PE, I have seen so many people whose hard work has just been hijacked by trusting somebody too much and sharing too much. So it is about finding the right people, and often a professional outsider with the right ethics is the person who can assist best. I don't know if here in the group attending are any industrial psychologists, but industrial psychologists, here is a job for you. This is something that as an outsider you can help businesses with. It is with the stimulation of substantial long-term goals that it is easier to let go of what does not work and to set in motion the alternatives. Once we see something attractive on the other side of the raging river, we can leave behind what doesn't work because we can see something that we believe in. So that was my second guideline. I'm going to take now just a few minutes for my third guideline. Thank you for your patience. I hope this will also be relevant to you. My last guideline I want to share, I try to be selective here, is about staying resilient, because resilience is our power. And especially now in these transitional years, resilience is everything. And we need resilience business-wise, and we need it in our personal capacity. So resilience business-wise, I think these days, comparing notes with other people in the BNI network is a lot about dovetailing our activities. We may know what we love most to do and what has been the trump card in our business, but we may not generate enough of that work and not enough of the income. So activities that are a bit, we could say, a bit of a side hustle, if I can use that terminology, using a hobby, something you can also do to generate extra income, this is not going to kill your business. It may just dovetail activities and add extra income. And nothing we ever do is ever lost or wasted, because we build always up a new connection or a new skill. I can give you an example, but I'm giving too much examples of myself. I'm going to skip this. You can use your own imagination for that. So we must be brave enough to improvise and try alternatives here as well. Improvise while we prepare for those sustainable goals in the future. And it's also a good idea that if we need to work with somebody else to have a bigger cooperative effort for a bigger project, to just keep it a temporary alliance. Don't sign big business partnerships under such a difficult time, because if money is not enough, a partnership will inevitably become conflict-riddled and it may fall apart. So temporary alliances according to a project are an ideal way to stay business resilient. But then on the personal level, we all need to manage our stress and our fear, and we must, I think, also prevent burnout. I am working quite closely with my background in medical sociology with health professionals, and they're all, well, themselves battling close to burnout if they're not already there, but they say this is the biggest problem we're going to have to deal with. So it's better to prevent it than to let it take over, because once it's there, it's going to chow at least a year out of your life. So I know managing stress is easier said than done, but thank goodness there are many forms of stress release. Some listen to music, some go canoeing, others go fishing, because you can still do that if you have the permit. I leave it to your imagination. What is your stress releaser? But fear is another thing. We all know about fear. And I also think we all recognize something which is a fundamental truth about fear. Many fears are born in loneliness, and they can grow out of proportion if we leave them that way. So we must not let our fears fester and put up a false brave face. I think it's very important to use the strategy of good companionship, trusted conversation with a good listener, because this is ultimately what helps us to cut down fear to a manageable size. So I think it's actually not an exaggeration that I want to say to you, don't bottle up your fears. And as freelancers, we can get isolated. We don't know with whom we can talk about this vulnerable aspect. And you may not speak to your competition about it, but I assume most of us have some trusted friends, and there is no shame in saying, I want to talk about it. Don't bottle up your fears. If you want to bottle anything at all, bottle some beers, because we're still going to be without alcohol for a long time. And I noticed that brewing beer is very popular, so you can bottle that. But human support, give and take of support, is ultimately our saving grace. And I'm actually quite glad to see that you have this network, because without a network as solo people, we are nowhere. So I am very glad to meet your network. And I know that amongst all the members, you may have your people that you know that live nearby or that you can Zoom with and connect with. So on this note, I vote for a network because we need to exchange support. And I'm going to hand over to you just to hear maybe some response from your side or to deal with some questions. And thank you for listening for such a long time. That was a long class.